Families of 7 female Israeli soldiers captured by Hamas during the October 7th attacks have released graphic footage of their abduction as they pile pressure on the government of Benjamin Netanyahu to secure their release. The video shows the women All Israel Defense Forces, IDF, personnel lined up against a wall, their hands and feet tied up. The faces of some of the women are bruised and bloodied. The footage was previously released by Hamas, according to the hostages' families forum. The campaigning group obtained it from the IDF, which had previously edited the video to exclude the most disturbing scenes. Every new testimony about what happened to the hostages echoes the same tragic truth. We must bring them all back home. Now, the Hostage Families Forum said in a press release Wednesday. The women were kidnapped during a Hamas raid on Israel's Nahal Oz military base, near the northern Gaza Strip, as part of the militant group's attacks on Israel that left around 1,200 people dead and saw more than 250 captured and taken hostage in the enclave. Following the attack, Israel launched a war in Gaza that has killed more than 35,000 Palestinians over the past 7 months, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza. The kidnapped women were working as IDF observers, a role that involves monitoring Israel's border security. Video of the ordeal has been made public as pressure mounts on Netanyahu to secure the release of the Israelis still held by Hamas, which his government has made a key goal of the Gaza offensive. Numerous attempts to strike a hostage for ceasefire deal with Hamas have faltered in recent months, infuriating those in Israel campaigning for the return of the captives. The state of Israel cannot accept a reality where its citizens constantly feel their lives are threatened and suffer from unrelenting fear and anxiety, the Hostages Families Forum said as it publicized the video on Wednesday. With each passing day, it becomes more challenging to bring the hostages back home, the living for rehabilitation and the murdered for proper burial. The Israeli government must not waste another moment. It must return to the negotiating table today. One of the women shown in the video, Ori Megidish, was rescued by the IDF in a special operation 23 days after being taken. Another, Noah Marciano, an IDF corporal, was killed while in Gaza and her body was returned to Israel in November. But 5 of the 7, Liri Albag, Karina Ariev, Agam Berger, Daniela Gilboa, and Nama Levy remain in captivity, more than 7 months after being taken across the border. More than 100 hostages were freed during a release deal in November, but the IDF believes there are still around 130 people being held in Gaza. Efforts to reach a deal that would pause the war in Gaza and allow the release of hostages have repeatedly been dashed. Earlier this month, Hamas said Israel's rejection of a ceasefire plan submitted by mediators at negotiations in Cairo had sent hostage release talks back to square one. The statement came a day after the latest round of Gaza truce and hostage deal talks ended in Cairo without a deal. A delegation of Kenyan command staff has arrived in Haiti, according to a law enforcement source in the country, ahead of the long-delayed arrival of a Kenyan-led multinational security support force in the Caribbean nation. The delegation is expected to assess this week whether equipment and facilities for the foreign police forces are ready, an assessment which will be decisive in determining a timeline for the deployment, a source with knowledge of the preparations told CNN. Members of the delegation are also expected to meet with U.S. and United Nations officials in the country, sources said. The UN Security Council last year authorized a multinational mission to support Haiti's national police in battling deadly gangs that have seized control of much of the capital Port-au-Prince. Despite strong support from the U.S. and other regional powers, however, the mission has been mired in uncertainty and legal challenges for months. It was further delayed following the resignation of former Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry in March, until the creation of a transitional governing council. The council said Tuesday that it met with top Haitian police brass to discuss the multinational mission. Haiti, through the Haitian National Police, will have overall control of all aspects of the field mission, including the mission's composition, aims, rules of engagement and health precautions, it emphasized in a statement on X. Kenya is currently finalizing preparations for the mission, the country's principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs Korir Singoi said Sunday, citing the successful creation of the council and other institutions in Haiti as key conditions. In view of that and in view of the decision of the courts in our republic essentially guiding how Kenya should be able to carry out this deployment, lots of reciprocal agreements were entered into between Kenya and Haiti, which facilitates Kenya's ability to deploy. And we are in the process. Our government is in the process of finalizing preparation to deploy. The mission is scheduled to launch by the end of this month. An unmanaged trust fund for the mission currently contains $21 million, provided by Canada, $8.7 million, France, $3.2 million, Spain, $3 million, and the United States, $6 million. Personnel for the mission have been offered by the Bahamas, Bangladesh, Barbados, Belize, Benin, Chad, and Jamaica, in addition to Kenya. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday defended U.S. funding for the mission in a Senate Foreign Relations hearing, warning that Haiti is on the precipice of becoming an all-out failed state without international support. I understand some of the skepticism that exists about another mission in Haiti, but I think what we have going for us is this. First, a general revulsion of the people at the direction that the country has taken, including gangs that are dominating Port-au-Prince and trying to undermine governance. A democratic trajectory that's been disrupted by failing to have a government that actually has a clear mandate, and all of that has also had the effect of interrupting development assistance, other forms of assistance that people so desperately need, he said. Haiti's national police have already taken back control of the airport and other critical infrastructure, he added. In fact, today, commercial flights resumed in Haiti, and we anticipate that American carriers will begin flying again in the days ahead. U.S. President Joe Biden will welcome Kenyan President William Ruto and First Lady Rachel Ruto to the White House on Thursday, with Haiti high on the expected agenda. Even Africa's wealthiest man has trouble traveling in his own continent. Despite doing business in multiple countries, Nigerian-born Aliko Dangote complains he faces far more hurdles crossing Africa than visitors with European passports ever do. As an investor, as someone who wants to make Africa great, I have to apply for 35 different visas on my passport, Dangote told the recent Africa CEO Forum in Kigali. I really don't have the time to go and drop off my passport in embassies to get a visa, he said to laughter from the audience. The 67-year-old entrepreneur's visa woes have reignited a fresh firestorm about the frustrations of traveling within Africa for Africans. It's even more infuriating for many Africans that European passports from former colonial masters have more visa-free access in Africa than many African passports. It's a point Dangote made powerfully in Kigali, when he turned to the French executive next to him and deadpanned, I can assure you that Patrick Pouyanné, CEO of Total Energies, doesn't need 35 visas on a French passport, which means you have freer movement than myself in Africa. Dangote commended Rwanda, which eliminated visas for all African nationals in 2023. Benin, the Gambia and Seychelles also offer visa-free access to all Africans. But many African countries still require visas from other Africans, and the experience is fraught with discrimination, hostility, and sky-high fees. Nigerian travel filmmaker Teo Ena says he was forced to give a stool sample in front of an Ethiopian immigration officer to confirm he hadn't ingested any drugs when he landed in Addis Ababa in April 2021. It was my most humiliating experience traveling within Africa, he told CNN by phone from London. He has also been detained at airports in Kenya and South Africa because of his Nigerian passport. This year, Ena announced that he bought a passport from the Caribbean country of St. Kitts and Nevis for $150,000 so he can travel more freely. Sometimes you go to a country, and it is no longer visa on arrival. There are cases where people get deported when they land because they change the policy mid-flight, the 31-year-old YouTuber says. The African Union has said one of its goals is to remove restrictions on Africans' ability to travel, work, and live within their own continent by transforming restrictive laws and promoting visa-free travel, but implementation has been slow. Free movement within the continent is a critical part of the African continental free trade area, but action hasn't followed the commitments. The fear of permanent migration is one of the reasons why African nations don't make it easy for other Africans to visit, migration researcher Alan Hirsch told CNN. There's a fear in richer African countries that people from poorer nations might be looking for a way to permanently move there, he explains. A lot of Africans cross borders informally, and we don't have a real record of that. Some countries fear people applying for asylum and then disappearing under the radar. The retired University of Cape Town professor runs a program on migration at the New South Institute think tank in Johannesburg. He says the integrity of passport and visa systems, especially in poorer African countries, has also held back Africans' mobility. People have found illegal ways of obtaining passports. For example, someone pretending to be Burundian without actually being from that country. While Africans can move relatively freely within their regions, traveling further away is still challenging. Travelers from East African Community countries don't need a visa within the bloc, and most parts of Southern and West Africa are open to nationals from the respective regions. But even what looks like progress can introduce some fresh bottlenecks. A Nigerian visa on arrival used to be $25 for Kenyan passport holders. But after changes to the application process, Kenyans now have to apply for a Nigerian e-visa in advance, at a cost of $215. Kenyan President William Ruto famously promised to eliminate visas for everybody traveling to the East African nation. He introduced an electronic travel authorization instead, but the application process is similar to that of a visa. It costs $30 without processing fees, and approval may take several days. Many visa applications require an application form, bank statements, flight and hotel bookings. Applicants are often rejected for incomplete documentation or for unclear reasons. South Africa held my passport for almost 5 months, the Nigerian content creator Teo says. His new St. Kitts passport allows him to go to more African countries than his Nigerian passport. Passengers on a Singapore Airlines flight hit by severe turbulence on Tuesday described a sudden, dramatic drop as all hell broke loose on board the Boeing airliner carrying 229 passengers and crew. At first, the flight was perfectly normal, said passenger Andrew Davies, who was traveling to New Zealand for business. He described the flight as quite smooth. I don't remember any turbulence at all. Flight SQ321 was cruising at 37,000 feet from London to Singapore when flight tracking data shows the plane dropped sharply before climbing several hundred feet, then repeated the dip and ascent for about a minute. Many passengers were having breakfast at the time of the incident. Then, about 9 or 10 hours into the roughly 13-hour flight, he was watching a movie when he saw the seatbelt sign light up. So he put his seatbelt on. Thank goodness I did, because within moments of doing that, all hell broke loose, he told CNN's Aaron Burnett out front. The plane just felt like it dropped. It probably only lasted a few seconds, but I remember vividly seeing shoes and iPads and iPhones and cushions and blankets and cutlery and plates and cups flying through the air and crashing to the ceiling. The gentleman next to me had a cup of coffee, which went straight all over me and up to the ceiling, Davies said. Images from the plane afterward showed the cabin in disarray, with papers, cups and water pitchers scattered on the floor, and ceiling panels and piping hanging loose. Davies was sitting toward the front of the plane and witnessed some of the injuries sustained by dozens of passengers, including Jeff Kitchen, a 73-year-old Briton who died on the flight. That gentleman was sitting right behind me, he said. Lots of people needed some help, but we tended to this gentleman, and I helped carry him, get him out of the seat, and we laid him on the floor so that some medical professions could administer CPR. Kitchen was given CPR for about 20 minutes, said Davies. Meanwhile, he said, there was so much screaming, and people's injuries were evident. When he turned around, he saw one passenger with a big gash in her head and blood pouring down her face, and another elderly passenger in severe shock. Another passenger, 28-year-old student Jafran Azmir, told Reuters that the aircraft had begun tilting up and shaking. Very suddenly there was a very dramatic drop, so everyone seated and not wearing a seatbelt was launched immediately into the ceiling, he told Reuters. Some people hit their heads on the baggage cabins overhead and dented it. They hit the places where lights and masks are and broke straight through it. Azmir added that the whole thing was really quick, which is why I think nobody could really respond to it. People didn't have time to react, he said. There were passengers in the plane bathrooms and air crew still standing when the turbulence hit. The plane was diverted to Bangkok after the incident, which injured 104 of the passengers, according to an update at Wednesday lunchtime from the Samatave Srinagar Hospital, which treated many of the travelers. Those injured on the flight included citizens from Australia, Malaysia, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Spain, the United States and Ireland, the hospital said in an earlier update. Those needing medical assistance were sent to several hospitals in the Thai capital, while others were looked after at a clinic at the airport. Samatave Srinagar Hospital said 20 travelers remained in intensive care units on Wednesday. Josh Silverstone, one of the passengers on the Singapore Airlines flight, described feeling happy to be alive as he was leaving Samatave Srinagar Hospital on Wednesday evening. Speaking with journalists on his way out, the 24-year-old British citizen said he had suffered a cut on his eye and a chipped tooth in the turbulence. He also said that after the incident had taken place, he had let his mother know he was okay by purchasing an in-flight Wi-Fi package for the first time in his life. Silverstone described the aftermath of the emergency landing in Bangkok, saying he started vomiting, which prompted him to look for medical care. According to Silverstone, there are still several passengers being treated at the hospital, many apparently with spinal injuries and in a much worse physical state than he is. Silverstone told journalists he was going to Bali to see my boys when the horror on SQ-321 unfolded, but he still hopes to eventually get there. Of the 211 passengers and 18 crew on board the original flight, 143 were transported via a relief flight to Singapore, where they landed early Wednesday morning. According to Singapore Airlines CEO Goh Choon Phong in a video message released on Facebook. The remaining 79 passengers and 6 crew members are still in Bangkok, including those receiving medical care and their family members. Kittapong Kittikachorn, the general manager of the Bangkok airport, said on Tuesday that preliminary investigations suggest Kitchen had suffered from a heart condition, and that the autopsy process is ongoing. Several passengers had broken arms, but the majority of injuries were cuts and bruises, he added. Goh, the CEO, extended his condolences to Kitchen's family and loved ones, saying the airline was deeply saddened by this incident, and was very sorry for the traumatic experience that passengers endured. The airline is cooperating with authorities on the investigation, he added. Singapore's Ministry of Transport is investigating the incident, saying Tuesday it was in touch with its Thai counterparts and would be sending investigators to Bangkok. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board is also sending personnel to Singapore to help the investigation, including a representative of the board and 4 technical advisors. Europe has struggled over the Middle East for a very long time. The decision by Ireland, Spain, and Norway to recognize a Palestinian state tells us more about the domestic politics of those countries than anything else. Obviously, the decision of 3 European nations to take this step is newsworthy and will have repercussions diplomatically, perhaps putting pressure on their allies to take a firmer stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict. However, it is also reasonable to say that thus far, no amount of pressure from even the U.S. has had a major impact on the thinking of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel responded by recalling the ambassadors of the 3 countries, accusing them of rewarding terror with the decision. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel responded by recalling the ambassadors of the 3 countries, accusing them of rewarding terror with the decision. Conversations about what recognition of statehood practically means and how helpful it is to the Palestinian cause in the long run are all entirely valid. But the reality is that the stakes are quite low for the majority of European countries when it comes to issues relating to Israel and the Palestinians. In Ireland, Spain, and Norway, support for a Palestinian state chimes with the broader electorate and is unlikely to receive any political blowback. That isn't necessarily the case in other European countries. While supporting a peaceful 2-state solution in the long term, Germany has been consistent in its support for Israel, as have Hungary, Poland, the UK, and others. The main consequence of this is military support, which inevitably raises questions about complicity in the war against Hamas, namely weapons being used to kill civilians. The UK government is currently under pressure to publish legal advice on whether or not selling arms to Israel falls foul of international law. But these are largely domestic issues. For a long time, European governments have mostly considered the Middle East, especially Israel, to be something that the U.S. deals with, in part due to the U.S.'s military operations in the region. European countries simply do not have a huge amount of influence in this area. The Middle East was not something that dominated European thinking in a major way until the fallout from the Arab Spring led to an enormous influx of migrants into continental Europe. Aside from the practical implications of mass migration, it also presented a security risk, with terror groups hiding among refugees and carrying out atrocities across the continent. That isn't to say Europeans didn't care about the Middle East, specifically the Palestinian cause. Large sections of Ireland are supportive of Palestine due to its own history of occupation, while Norway mediated the famous Oslo Accords. The European Union has historically sent huge amounts of humanitarian aid into Palestinian territories and supported a 2-state solution. Indeed, the European Commission responded to Wednesday's news. The European Union has a long-standing commitment to the vision of an independent and sovereign state of Palestine, living side by side with Israel in peace and security. Whether this pushes any kind of peace process along or not remains to be seen. This is not a coordinated European effort. Norway is not a member of the EU, and the idea that 27 member states would all be willing to go as far as Ireland and Spain seems extremely unlikely. Yes, it might put pressure on bigger players to take a stand. But Europe doesn't speak with one voice and is unlikely to anytime soon.